You're listening to Market the Brew, a leading resource for promoting and marketing craft beer. Join in as we share with you, straight from the source, tools and strategies craft brewers from around the country are using right now to achieve significant success. Like many in brewing, our guest today also learned about brewing in college. Not from a course he took, but from a roommate he had who would make ciders and beers while sharing the brewing process. Over the years, our guest would continue to homebrew, and with each batch would ask himself if this were something I could do as a career. That thought eventually led to a discussion with his wife, and with her support, he quit his job and moved the family to Belgium. In Belgium, he would work in a brewery, learning the craft in the old European tradition. After a couple of months in Belgium, they finally moved back, where he eventually landed a position with DC's Gordon Birch Brewing as a Beltway brewer. He would work at 3 of the 4 breweries on a regular basis until taking the head brewer job at one of those locations. A few years later, he and his business partner Brett would eventually open their own brewery in Silver Spring, Maryland. If this story sounds a little familiar, it might be that Christian Layke and Brett Robinson were the guests of the last Market the Brew podcast. In episode 44, we spoke with Christian and Brett before they opened the doors of their brewery. They had been brewing collaboration beers with local breweries in the crescendo of Convergent Brewery collaborations projects. 6 months later, they opened the doors to Silver Branch Brewing, and a year after opening, COVID hit. Things are just now starting to get back to normal, and they are starting to see people returning to work. The brewery is on the first floor of a 10-story office building that is part of a 3-building office center 1 block from the DC Metro Station, a bustling neighborhood pre-COVID. But before we start the podcast, we would like to thank CBP Connects for sponsoring this episode of the Market the Brew podcast. CBP Connects are in-person workshops designed for you, the industry decision maker, and will be half education and half networking. Join your fellow craft beer professionals this June 20th through 22nd in St. Louis, Missouri for 10 interactive workshops and 3 nightly receptions with drinks on CBP. You can learn more about this not-to-miss event at cbpconnects.com. Just a quick reminder that the Market the Brew podcast is available at marketthebrew.com and on Apple Podcast as well as other popular podcast sites. The video of this episode is also available on the Promote the Brew YouTube channel for you to watch or listen in. We hope you'll join us and share these episodes with your family and friends. Now find a comfortable place to sit and grab a glass of your favorite beer. Kick back and listen in as Christian Layke, co-founder of Silver Branch Brewing in Silver Spring, Maryland, shares with Danielle and Travis some exciting news about the brewery they just announced on April 11th, 2022. Hello and welcome to the Market the Brew podcast. Today we're meeting with Christian Layke from Silver Branch Brewing in Silver Branch, Maryland. And I'm going to turn this over to Travis and Danielle this morning. Travis is back joining us today, and we're excited to have him back and excited to hear more about what Christian has going on. For those who don't know, Christian was on our very last podcast before we took the hiatus, and it's great to have him back as one of the first podcasts of the new season. So
thanks very much. I'm glad to be here.
Welcome.
Thanks very much. It's good to see you again.
It's so nice to meet you, Christian. Thanks for coming on the episode.
It's nice meeting you again, or nice meeting you as well, and I'm glad to be back.
So before we begin with all of your business questions, we'd like to get to know you a little bit better. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started brewing?
Yeah, so I am one of the co-founders of Silver Branch Brewing Company, which is located in Silver Spring, Maryland. We just had our 3rd year anniversary about a month ago. So we had, prior to COVID, exactly a year of business, getting ourselves situated, and then had to close down for COVID. And after 2 years of COVID, we're hoping that this coming year will be a little bit more quote unquote normal, since we don't actually know what normal looks like at this point. But it's been fantastic. We have really been supported by the community and lots of different ways. And it just feels great to be here in springtime again, where people are coming out and enjoying beers on our beer garden. In terms of my background, I started brewing in college, as many brewery owners did. I had a graduate school friend who was over 21, and he was making cider and beer, and started making with him and immediately fell in love with the process. And I had a different career before going professional. I worked for an environmental nonprofit for about 12 or 15 years, but never shook the love of brewing. And so I kept home brewing, and eventually my wife was kind enough to take our baby boy and go to Brussels with me, no, not Brussels, but Belgium with me for a couple of months, so I could intern with a brewery there and get a sense of whether this is something I wanted to do professionally. And I found that it definitely was. And she eventually told me to go for it when she got a job in the private sector, so she was able to support the family. And so I switched careers to becoming professional. I volunteered for a couple of days a week at Chop House down in DC. And then the brewer there was kind enough to help me get a job as an assistant brewer with Gordon Biersch. And I was what they call the Beltway brewer for Gordon Biersch, which means that I went around to different locations in the DC region. So I worked with 3 different breweries, and once in a blue moon with a 4th, which was fantastic. I mean, a miserable commute, but fantastic from the perspective of learning from multiple different brewers at multiple different locations, where each brewery had its own little idiosyncrasies, and just get a sense of how to solve problems and deal with challenges as they come up. So after doing that for about 18 months, I got a head brewer position at one of those 3 locations when the brewer left, and did that for about 6 years. And then resigned, and in order to be able to dedicate myself to opening Silver Branch full time. And here we are, about 5 years since that time. Now we're here having Silver Branch open for 3 years.
Wow, that's awesome. How much experience you've gotten before opening your brewery. Was there anyone along the way that inspired you or really kind of had an influence on you now?
Gosh, so many people. I'd say that some of the names would be Jean-Louis Diet and his wife at Brasserie à Vapeur, who hosted me in Belgium. Various bosses, Jim Sobchak and Tom Dargan at Gordon Biersch, were both hugely instrumental in my growth as a brewer, and making me feel like this was something that opening my own brewery was something I could hopefully succeed at, and be willing to take other people's money and invest it in something that is a bit of a risky proposition. So yeah, those guys and many others, many of my colleagues, just gave me enough sense that that I had what it took to make this work, that I was able to take the leap and be here.
That's incredible, the amount of support that you've received. Was there anything that you were super excited about, or are there any favorite parts to brewing for you? Like anything that you really get fired up about?
Oh, I think for me, it's everything. I mean, the piece that I have always loved about brewing is the connection between beer and culture and history and economics. And it's just such a interesting, fascinating story that goes far beyond the liquid. I mean, we all love beer and drinking beer, but what I love is how there's stories of taxation and how that has influenced beer styles, and world wars and how those have inspired different beers. And then, of course, is just the piece of culture where it's tied to so many harvest festivals and other parts of day-to-day and seasonal life. That's the part that really jazzes me up, is just a sense of how beer has been so instrumental in so many aspects of life. And that has found its way into a lot of how we do things at Silver Branch, because we have a lot of celebrations. We've got our Kolsch Fest coming up in about a month or 6 weeks. And that's a day where we try to emulate the way that they serve Kolsch in Cologne. with the smaller glasses and constantly coming around. And, Oktoberfest is an obvious one. But, we try to get people to wear lederhosen, and we have an Oompa band come out. And so we just try to capture that cultural aspect. And in fact, the whole underpinning of Silver Branch in terms of the concept is to celebrate the 4 major beer cultures of the world. So we've got Central European, Belgian, British, and American beers all being celebrated in the beers that we brew. So we've developed a bit of a reputation for being inspired by tradition, traditional brews, and a bit unusually continental beers. So the lagers, the saisons, some of the lower gravity British ales all find their way into our brewing in a way that's a little unusual for startup breweries, which mostly in our estimation focus on more current trends like hazy IPAs, which of course we do because you can't not do them.
Right.
But we also have a very healthy mix of other beers.
We have a brewery around here that offers a beer school, and I'm relatively new to the beer scene, so I have a lot to learn. And like you said, the history is fascinating.
Yeah.
I went to this beer school and my eyes were bugged out. I was so excited, just hearing the history of the British Isles and the ales. That was kind of the theme that night. But I was like, there's just so much to learn, and this is only one style.
Yeah, exactly. You can delve so deeply. I certainly don't have time for it, but I've always thought it would be fascinating to write at least an article, but maybe even a very short book about the role of taxation on beer styles. Yeah, it's just you can come at it from so many different angles that if you like to nerd out on things, there's a lot to do with the beer world.
Yes.
And talking about Silver Branch as like your brewery, how big is Silver Branch? How big is your tap room to your brewery? Because we noticed that you are down near the downtown Silver Springs area, and you're in. It looks like a business facility, I guess.
Yeah, so we are in the ground floor of a 10-story office building.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the result of a decision that we made, that we wanted to focus, we wanted to start up in an area where we knew there would be a lot of traffic. Of course, we didn't anticipate COVID being a thing,
Right.
But we are a 1-minute walk, literally, I've timed it, from the exit/entrance to a metro station here in Silver
Oh,
Springs.
nice. Okay.
And there's a large county parking lot so people have to walk right through the plaza, which is where our beer garden is, in order to get to the metro. So we figured we're better to have a brewery than somewhere where you're going to have thousands of people walking every single day as part of their daily routine. And so we chose to locate there. The landlord, which is a huge multinational real estate company, they wanted to activate the space. And so we were able to get a rent that, although as our accountants say, it's the highest rent of any of their clients, it is less than the rent that you would pay for an office space in the same area.
Okay.
Because they wanted to just have a spot where they knew people would be coming out and be visible, and instead of just passing through to go to the metro, they would actually stick around and have a beer. And so it's worked out really well for both entities, I think. We've definitely activated the space, and now that we see some semblance of normal life returning, people are getting back into the offices. We're actually getting requests for private events again. So we're hoping that this whole idea of being in an urban area will pay off again. It is definitely a bit of a challenge from the brewing perspective, but it's a trade-off that we figured was worthwhile. As we were building our business plan, we talked to a lot of people and heard again and again what a challenge it is to build a brewery based entirely on distribution. And so we figured that we would try to design a business that would focus more on retail sales initially and then grow into distribution over time. We, because of COVID, have had to depend on distribution to a much greater extent than we anticipated. in our business plan because people just weren't able to come out. We had to shut down for extended periods of time, and then there was a mask mandate, and people just were nervous. But yeah, so that accelerated the wholesale aspect of our business substantially based on what we compared to what we thought. But that is not a terrible thing. Now we're able to build that part of the business while bringing back a bit more of the focus on the taproom side of things that we weren't able to quite realize in the way that we had anticipated.
You get a lot of like employees from the business area in your brewery, like in the building and whatnot.
We do. Yeah, we do. There's lots of businesses that come down for happy hours. We actually just have a standing happy hour every Wednesday, one local business from the plaza, because we're one of 3 buildings in this plaza and they're all about the same size. So there's a lot of people who work there, especially when people are not working from home. And so we get a lot of happy hours and just casual people coming by. And we've gotten people who come down with ideas for collaborating on a beer and things like that. So it's great. We love the fact that we've become a part of their office tradition. So
Right.
It feels really good. Yeah. And we're up the street from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And they're going back to work in April in office. And so that'll be great fun because we used to host lots of happy hours, but also events, after meetings, they would come by and just for a post-meeting get together. And so, yeah, we're looking forward to hosting them again as well.
It kind of reminds us, there's a brewery in Milwaukee who kind of has a similar setup. They're located in an office building. And it's kind of funny, they offer a discount to employees that are within the building. So
Like a neighborly discount.
yeah,
Okay.
and they have a very full lunch break.
Yeah, we've had to shut down our lunch program for the time being because of nobody being around, but we hopefully we'll relaunch that at some point when we look like we've got a bit more full capacity again.
Yeah.
God.
How many barrels do you think of beer do you guys produce? And then are you guys self-distributing or do you have a distributor right now? And what markets areas are you in?
So we do a hybrid right now. We are self-distributed in Maryland.
Okay.
And that has evolved some recently insofar as we have been represented for a long time by an organization called the Craft Coalition, which is a sales force. And so we have our own salesperson who goes out, but we work with the Craft Coalition because they have salespeople much further afield than would make sense for us to be sending people out. And so they have people all throughout the state of Maryland. Well, okay, not all. We're not on the Eastern Shore and we're not all the way in Western Maryland, but all the way up to the Pennsylvania border and through Baltimore are represented by the Craft Coalition. Just a couple of months ago, they got their own warehouse and they're now serving as a courier for us. Okay. So strictly speaking, we're self-distributed, but they're the ones who are actually driving trucks now to get the beer out, which has been really helpful because when COVID hit, we had to transform our private event space into staging for self-distribution. In order to send the van out every day, we needed the pallets out there to compile the beer that was going out. But when we saw people were interested in private events again, we thought that this was a good solution for us to be able to have both sides of the business flourish. And so so in Maryland, we're self-distributed. And in Virginia, which we entered last fall, we have a small startup distributor working for us. That's why I said we're in a hybrid situation. Yeah. Oh, and in DC, we're also self-distributed. Okay. But as a Maryland brewery, for legal reasons as well as practical reasons, it was not realistic to self-distribute into Virginia. This might be an opportune moment for me to segue into the news that I mentioned to you guys that we have. Which is that we are actually in the process of merging with a Northern Virginia brewery.
Cool.
Yeah, and the reason that I said this is an opportune moment is because one of the impetuses for this step is that they have a strong relationship with a lot of Northern Virginia retailers. And so it's a strategic merger in a whole variety of reasons, but one of them is that we anticipate that they'll help us to expand our Virginia sales and distribution footprint as part of our growth ambitions. So
Oh,
just to give you a
exciting.
bit more, yeah, it's very exciting. It's Old Ox Brewery in Ashburn, Virginia. And they've been there since 2014. My gosh, I can't. It shows a sign that you're getting pretty old when you can't remember which decade you're even talking about. So they're a couple of years older than us. They founded in 2014, and they also work with the Craft Coalition. We spoke with them before we opened our doors, and got to know the founder of Old Ox really well via some conversations. And as a result of those, we actually have the same banker and the same accountants. So all in all, this is a very easy merger compared to what it could be if if some of those things weren't true. But yeah, so we're highly complementary. Silver's branch, as you already noted, is in a downtown location. We have 10,000 square feet, about half of which is brewery space and half of which is front of house taproom area. And we have now a total of 9 fermenters and 3 bright tanks in there, a canning line. There is no way we can put another piece of equipment in this building.
That's true.
It's completely chock full. And so to grow, we needed to find a way to brew more beer.
Mhm.
And we looked into building a second brewery. And it turns out that with the real estate market being what it is, and just the time it would take to go from breaking ground to having brewing happening in a new location, we were going to miss a lot of opportunity to grow in that time frame. And so one day we were talking to our banker, who is also, as I mentioned, Chris Burns, the founder of Old Ox's banker. He mentioned that the idea of merging might be worth looking into. And lo and behold, we got an email a few days later from the founder of Old Ox saying that Jimmy, our banker, had mentioned this idea to him. And we started chatting, and so they are more traditionally a distribution company. So they were built as a distribution company. When they founded, Virginia had not yet passed the law that allowed breweries to have a tap room. And so logically, it follows that they were built to be a wholesale distribution company. And so they've got the tall ceilings, the wide open spaces, a pad that can accept more fermenters. So in all regards, they're ready for expansion and increasing brewing capacity. On the flip side, because they opened before Virginia had the law allowing for tap room, Silver Branch has more experience on the hospitality and the retail side of things. And so they're excited to have bring our experience to bear on that side of the business and to increase their taproom sales. So all in all, it's a very strategic relationship. We're super excited. It feels like we're kind of blue sky, as my business partner Brett likes to say. It's just all thinking about new problems and new solutions instead of feeling we're mired in the same challenges and the same lack of opportunity in terms of being able to be creative. So this is a really exciting chapter for us.
Congratulations, this is so exciting.
Yeah, it's great.
How many barrels did you guys do last year?
We did about 3,000 barrels last year, and that's about the same size. Old Ox is about the same size in terms of their total barrelage. Mm-hmm.
So together you guys will be doing probably close to 7 this year?
Yeah, we're hoping to, Silver Branch has been growing at about a 30% per annual growth rate. And so we're hoping to, keep that same growth rate for the combined company. So we would like to, finish this year because this year things, realistically are going to be a little slower just because there's a lot of things that we have to mesh together. But so this year, I think we'd like to end between 7,000 to 7,500, and by next year, be moving toward 10,000.
Wow, exciting.
Yeah, it's great.
You guys seem to be moving pretty quick because 4 years ago you guys just opened, whatnot. So I mean,
three years ago we opened. Yeah.
Okay.
And we were, I think, well, I don't just think, I think my business partner and I are convinced that we were very fortunate that we were a self-distributing company when COVID hit, because even though our canning line at that point was very, very rudimentary, we were able to really control our own destiny. And so we were able to keep the relationships with all of the retailers alive and well, while a lot of companies that were distributed by distributors, they were at the mercy, so to speak, of their distributor and whatever approach their distributor took to things. And oftentimes, because they're larger companies, they had a much harder time being nimble. So there are times when being represented by a large distributor is, I imagine, very beneficial in that they have access to some markets that a self-distributing company wouldn't have. But in COVID, it was actually enormously beneficial because we were able to do exactly what these smaller companies needed in order for their needs to be met. And so because we were also a small company, we were able to be nimble enough to continue growing even in the face of COVID challenges. So that was really important for us.
We were listening to the previous podcast, and it was really cool to kind of hear where you guys were 4 years ago when you did the episode versus seeing where you are now. And when we were hearing the old podcast, you guys were talking a lot about how you were collaborating with a lot of beer, like breweries. So you're making collaboration beers, and that's kind of how you got started. And one of the series that you did were the Convergent World's collaboration series. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Convergent World was the name that we came up with for this series of brews that we did with breweries prior to us being able to open our doors. We were trying to get our name out there and let people know that there was this new company that was on the cusp of opening. And a number of local breweries were kind enough to let us brew with them and come up with a recipe and a beer that had our name on it even before we had opened our doors. So we have definitely kept the collaborations going over time. We've done a number every single year. It has gotten to be increasingly difficult because of the capacity constraints that I mentioned earlier, where the fermenters are pretty much full of beer that we need to brew just to keep our customers happy each month. So the opportunity to put aside time for collaborations has gotten a little bit harder and harder. But on the other hand, we see that this collaboration with Old Ox is kind of like the biggest collaboration yet. And we're also excited because we will now have access to larger fermenters and can take some of our brewing capacity and dedicate it back to the idea of working with our friends at local breweries to make collaboration beers again. So that's something we're really excited about.
And today you guys are releasing a new beer that just came out. I saw a story on how you guys got the name. Do you want to explain to our listeners a little bit on what the name, how the name came about?
Yeah, so we love the process of naming beers because it's just fun to figure out what inspiration can lead to the name of a beer that is tells a little bit of a story, but is yet catchy enough that it's fun, even if you don't know the name of the story behind it. And so Squeegee Master, I think, is one of those names where if you know the story, it's great fun, but even if you don't, it's just intriguing enough that it's just a great name. So we had hired a new employee, a new brewer, and who is now our head brewer. His name was Chris. And in fact, everybody seems like at Silver Branch is named Chris. We have 4 Chris something B. And with the founder of Old Ox being Chris Burns, he just adds to that. So, and his wife is Chris Burns as well. Yeah, it seems like everybody is Chris B something or other. But anyhow, Chris was a brand new employee, and it was either a second or third day, literally working for Silver Branch. And because every brewery does things a little bit differently, you're apt to have things go wrong once in a while. It's just a natural thing to have happen. And one thing that we do differently than what his previous brewery did is that we transfer our IPAs under pressure as opposed to with a pump.
Okay.
And so at the end of the transfer, the tank is pressurized. And Habit took over for him, and he opened a valve that was coming out of this pressurized tank. And the way that the hoses were configured, it went straight into our hot liquor tank.
Oh no.
And so all of this, 15 pounds of pressure went back in there. It immediately popped the manway off of the hot liquor tank and spewed steam and hot water all over one of the fire sprinkler heads, which was right above it. And of course, the head did what it's designed to do, and it started to spew massive quantities of disgusting black water all over the brewery. And the only saving grace was that it was in the brewery, which of course is designed to handle large amounts of liquid. And so the first thing we all did was grab squeegees and to start squeegeeing the water toward the floor drains instead of having it go out into the tap room, which is what it was threatening to do.
Yeah.
And so, we managed to, without burning any of ourselves, figured out how to get everything closed in such a way that the pressure wasn't coming through any longer. And of course, the fire department was notified, and they came out and they said, "Oh, well, we took care of it. Everything should be, stopping soon." And half an hour later, it wasn't stopping. So at this point, we'd been squeegeeing like crazy. We had like 5 or 6 people, 4 squeegees and 2 push brooms, all just keeping this water from coming out. And eventually, it turns out one of the building engineers realized that they had turned the wrong valve and had not turned off the water. But then eventually, they turned off the water, and then as we were sitting down afterward, having a beer to recover our wits, the idea that we had to have a beer called Squeegee Master came up. That's how Squeegee Master was born, and it was a recipe that Chris had come up with at his previous brewery. And so it was the first recipe of his that Silver Branch produced. And it's been a huge success for us. It's a sour ale that has a little bit of fruit added during fermentation. So it's not sweet, it's a quite dry style goza, American style goza, fruited goza. And it's just become a huge favorite. We changed the fruits a little bit almost every brew. So each one has Tahitian lime in it. And then there's some other fruit to go with the lime, and just a very refreshing summertime quencher.
Sounds delicious.
It does. And hearing the story, it makes me want to try it more.
Exactly.
And how cool, when we found the story, you guys were recording it and putting it on Instagram, but also doing it on TikTok. I mean, to reach so many people, to see this story, it was so intriguing. There aren't many breweries that use these different platforms. So you're really reaching a lot of different ages, like people who use Instagram versus TikTok. I mean, it's really creative.
Yeah, it's great. We have our marketing manager named Erin. She's really got her pulse on the different ways that people use social media. I am definitely not a social media person. And so it's fantastic having people with different talents and different inclinations working together to get these stories out there and let the people who love to drink beer to know what we're up to and why they should come by and try our beer.
Yeah, we never would have known about this story had we not seen that video.
Does she also does she also do the can art? Because I'm looking at the can art and everything, the high times, and then the squeegee master, and you have a person literally squeegeeing the floor and everything. Does she do the can art as well?
No, so she doesn't. We've had an artist who we started using for our can art, I'd say 4 to 6 months after we opened, maybe something along those lines. And he was immediately a runaway success. I mentioned that we have a slightly nerdy take on the world, and he just gets our nerdy sense of humor perfectly. I mean, he shares it. He doesn't just get it, he shares it. And so we would sit down and just brainstorm things, and every time we just ended up with a concept that just worked for the cans. And so he actually just a few weeks ago joined the company for our marketing as our marketing director, because in addition to doing art, he had a background working with media and marketing in the past up in New York. And so he just joined us as more than just our artist, which is fantastic because he takes all of this deep knowledge of our brand. And in fact, I mean, you could say that he is really the creator of our brand look and feel for our cans. And now he's going to help us to take that into the future and to help us to bring Old Ox into a clear sense of how their branding should correlate with the Silver Branch branding and get the two companies working together as well as possible. We actually just brewed our first collaboration beer with Old Ox just to get the brewing teams together and to start sharing experiences and expertise. And I came up with the idea of calling that Doppelganger. And then the founder of Old Ox, Chris, decided that it would be a good idea to shorten it to Doppelgang. So so that label actually has the three co-founders of our new combined company together, like in mirrored image, essentially. So you can look forward to that label. We just submitted that to TTB yesterday. So you can look forward to that label coming out in mid-May.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, we were scrolling through the different cans and we're like, whoa, look at this. This is so cool.
I said, my favorite is the High Times can art with the hop on like a snowboard.
Yeah, that's been a really fun series for us. We call it our Hopman series. And they have lots of different names, but where we can play on that sort of idea that we do. And so we've got one coming out soon that's called Flying High, and it's the hot man jumping out of an airplane skydiving.
That's great.
That and our series, our Saison series, which all have gnomes on them. That's been our other unexpected success. Because when we founded Silver Branch, we initially founded it under a different name. And we got a cease and desist, like so many companies do. I don't know if we talked about this in our previous podcast or not, but as so many companies do, we got a cease and desist and had to come up with a new name. And one of the names that we briefly toyed with was called Metronome, and decided that was not a very good brewery name, at least not for us. It could be for somebody else, perhaps. But we liked the idea, and then somehow we kept all of the names that we brainstormed for our new brewery name and are using them over time for beer names. And
cool.
Metronome was one of them. And the Metro is the name of the DC transit system. Mm-hmm. So we actually put this idea together. So we've got gnomes on the Metro car, and so that led off a whole series of gnome named beers. So Beyond the Gnome World is our flagship Saison, which won a GABF Gold a few years ago. And then we've got Nomenclature, All My Gnomies, and then Beyond Gnome for the Holidays. And okay. We've got a few more in store that'll come out over time. So that's been really fun.
You might need to get these on a t-shirt. These are awesome.
Yeah. So far, we just have Beyond the Gnome World on a t-shirt, but Metronome, it's high time for Metronome to be on a t-shirt as well. That one's a favorite.
For sure.
Well, you shared a little bit about your next steps as a brewery. Is there anything else or any goals that you have for Silver Branch or anything that you're hoping to do besides the merger? I mean, that's a big piece.
Yeah, so the merger, we are really excited about for so many reasons. One reason that I think we're excited is because as we grow in terms of revenue, I know we feel like we can continue to develop the structure of our company. As so many young companies, there's just a lot of, everybody doing everything because that's the only way to get things done. And we're hoping that this will allow us to develop our professional development a little bit and get people who specialize in tasks that they can really develop expertise in instead of having to be a bit of a jack of all trades. And hopefully it'll also allow us to do a little bit more things that we would like to do as a company, put together a little bit of a bonus structure, ideally be able to create a 401k, over time, hopefully we would be able to get into actually supporting people with contribution toward their healthcare. So I'd say that is definitely one of our goals as a brewery, is to become a better employer. We try as much as we can, but we're constrained by resources. And so hopefully as time goes by and we can increase revenues, we'll have a little bit more room to do well by the people who work so hard for us.
Well, I know we covered a lot in this episode. I mean, we asked so many questions about your business and your brewery. Is there anything else that we forgot to mention?
Let me think for a second. I think we've covered so much of what's going on. Nothing is coming to mind as to something we didn't talk about, but I wish we had. I was glad that we were able to cover a little bit about our branding. That's a really fun piece of the overall story for us.
Yeah, and we'll be posting some of the images from some of the can art in the show notes at marketthebrew.com so that you'll be able to see those images as well.
Great, that's great. So, yeah, but I appreciate your interest in having us back. I mean, it's fun to be able to step a big step back and think about things in a way that's not focused on whatever you're doing in the moment, but just, bigger picture, like what has happened over these last 3 years. And yeah, it's like people come in and they say things like, oh, it must be so much fun to have a brewery. And you're like, is it? I'm so focused on whatever few problems I'm trying to focus on right now that sometimes I lose sight of the big picture. And so this is a really fun opportunity to, just to, look at how things are going and to communicate just how things are fun and exciting, instead of just like the micro things that we're spending time on every day.
Well, we really appreciate you meeting with us today. It was fun to get to hear your story.
Great. Nice meeting you guys as well. I'm glad to see that the podcast is back.
Yeah, thank you. We are too.
We've reached the end of this episode, but there's plenty more to keep you busy. For online source materials and proven case studies delivered right to your inbox, sign up for our mailing list by visiting marketthebrew.com. We'll see you next time on Market the Brew.